I, 50s, may be acting too motherly towards my young neighbors, 20s, and worry I am crossing a social or personal boundary. I am in my 50s and have lived in my neighborhood for nearly 10 years with my husband, but the house next door, and many in the area, are homes renovated into apartments for students, so there are lots of young people around. I have seen and spoken to two young ladies new in the past year. Often when I go outside at night to talk, they live next door. Sometimes they come out and chat with me in my backyard, over the fence. I don't know if we are friends, but we are certainly friendly. Sometimes they lack things they need, and I will gift them an old beat-up blender or toaster. It is nothing to me and they need things. In return they sometimes come to help me, like helping me hang up shelves when I need an extra pair of arms. My husband warned me not to be creepy by chatting with young people, and I try to keep that in mind, but nothing seems untoward to me personally. I might have crossed a line when one afternoon when one of the girls asked if I could make a dentist appointment for her because she was afraid to call them. At first I chuckled a little, but she insisted and seemed sad. So as bemused as I was, she handed me her information and I made an appointment for her. I did it on speakerphone and we chatted afterwards about how the offices really don't care if you sound awkward. Just have your insurance information ready to read off of a paper and you will be okay. I told her this was a good and easy skill to learn. That's why I did speakerphone, so she could hear both sides. Because I remember being anxious about silly things in the past as well, and she needed an appointment, so I thought it wasn't too strange. When I told my husband later, he suggests I may be crossing a personal boundary, and he may be right. We are only neighbors and of very different ages, so not peers. And maybe I am acting like a mother, which could hold those girls back in the long run by preventing them the need to face some awkwardness themselves. On the other hand, it seems harmless to help neighbors when you are able. We only speak over a fence, but sometimes drink tea across the fence and chat a bit. It is nice to have company and they seem sweet. So I worry I am being selfish in wanting the company, and so am acting in an inappropriate way towards these students now. Can anyone advise on figuring out the best way to proceed? I'd like to be friendly neighbors, but would not like to be the weird old lady messing with the college kids. TL, doctor, I might be getting too friendly with the young ladies, 20s, who live next door and acting like a mother and therefore crossing boundaries. My husband and I are in our 20s and had some older neighbors across the street. They never had kids but just gave off that parent vibe. The husband stayed home most of the time, but we invited each other to get-togethers and he showed up if he was feeling well. I took care of their animals when they went on vacation. The wife would come over unannounced pretty often, a few times a week, and we would just sit and talk for hours. They both passed away in the beginning of 2020, within a few months of each other, and I miss them so much. Still find myself looking out the window sometimes to see if it's her walking over when I catch a glance of someone walking by. They definitely became part of our family. All this to say, please don't stop being friendly or helpful or motherly. I'm sure they would feel the same way I do if you were suddenly not there because you moved or something. What? I wish my older neighbors were this nice to my partner, my daughter and I. We're in our late 20s and they basically act like we don't exist. I once waved hi to one of them at the grocery store and she looked at me and kept walking. I think it's great that you're closing that gap between generations, and very sweet of you to help her make that appointment as well. You sound like the grandma they didn't ask for, but were given to help them along at this stage in life. There's nothing wrong with treating your neighbors like family even if they're much younger than you. Oh, that's sweet. I will say our relationship is likely only because we are smokers, so see each other over the fence often, but they are kind to include me in conversation and I am glad to get to know them in return. The only thing I didn't like about your comment was the implication I would be a grandma. I don't have children myself and maybe that keeps me in the delusion of youth a bit longer, haha. Can anyone advise on figuring out the best way to proceed? I'd like to be friendly neighbors, but would not like to be the weird old lady messing with the college kids. I think just staying aware of the difference between solicited and unsolicited attention is enough. Chatting over the fence with a neighbor for a couple minutes is different than trying to insert yourself into a conversation when your neighbor is hanging out with friends in their backyard. Offering an old appliance to a neighbor who needs one is different than deciding a neighbor could use one of your old appliances and offering it multiple times. Helping an anxious young adult make an appointment when they specifically asked you to do is a kindness. Hounding that neighbor about making another appointment when they need a checkup in 6 months is inappropriate. Follow your instincts. If you're worried about it, make a practice of responding to conversation more often than you initiate it. Edit, just to add some personal perspective. I'm in my mid-30s, so equidistant between you and your neighbors and your neighborly behavior is something I want to emulate as I get older. Knowing there's someone nearby who you could count on in an emergency is such a valuable feeling. Last year, my parents moved to my city after living 100 miles apart for 12 years. Even though I moved away from them on purpose and made sure they didn't buy a home within 2 miles of my house, it's been nice to have nearby people who I know I can count on in a squeeze. That new sense of security is making me realize that I need more friends who are 10 to 20 years older than me and who can model what it means to actually have your shit together instead of doing a slightly adequate job of faking it. Especially as my parents get further into their 60s and start to trend downward in those areas and I'll have to do more to pick up the slack. Non-familial trustworthy older acquaintances are really valuable. Your neighbor asked you for help. She clearly recognized that you are kind and caring. You helped her in a way that was genuinely helpful in the way you described, rather than just doing it for her. There is nothing wrong with the relationship between you as you've described it. I have friends in a range of ages, and think it's great to know people at different stages of life. You're totally fine. In fact, I think you're great. Girls clearly enjoy a friendly relationship with you. You aren't crossing any boundaries or acting inappropriately at all, and your husband should stop insinuating that you are. Mill forcing husband to live with her instead of with me and our baby. I moved back to my home country after my son was born. Husband came to the birth and we decided that it's better for us to stay here as a family. My son was born with medical issues that are best addressed here. The problem is that his mom is widowed and she's not accepting it. She lives in my husband's home country. She's not alone though, his divorced sister lives with her. However, Mill said she needs to have her son with her, just for his company. She takes care of herself, but his sister doesn't want the responsibility. His mom threatened that she would disown him as her son and never speak to him again if he doesn't come back to live with her. He tried reasoning with her and telling her that he's now a dad and his responsibilities changed and that he wants to be there for his son and raise him. She's having none of it though and says it's okay if he doesn't see his son for 1.5 years or more, expecting that COVID will be better, my son will be better and I'll move back to their country. But that's not happening. I refuse to move back. My husband doesn't want to spend time away from his son just to go keep his mom company, glorified chauffeur and babysitter. Since she doesn't listen to reason, how can my husband stay with me and my son, without ruining his relationship with his mother? He respects her and doesn't want to cut ties with her. He's in a difficult position. I would be so upset if my mom decided not to speak to me anymore. But thankfully my mom is a very understanding woman and always encouraged me to follow whatever path led me to be successful. He is raised in a family that never left the village they're from. He'd be the first to do so. Too long didn't read. How can my husband not ruin his relationship with his mom who is completely against him moving countries to be with me and our son? He should tell her it's okay if she doesn't see her son for 1.5 years. Right? Who needs him more? A grown woman or his baby? I don't understand this woman and I hate that she's putting my husband through this dilemma. He said my son isn't a pet rock that I can just leave behind. Then she got very defensive saying that not what she said and that he's trying to put words in her mouth. I don't know how to win this. Coming from someone who had to live apart from my fiancé for some time while our child was very young, 3-6 Mo, also because of parent issues. Our daughter literally forgot who he was. She saw him in pictures and we video chatted all the time, but when she finally saw him in person she was frightened, and it took weeks for her to finally warm up to him again. He was devastated and it was really hard for both of them to adapt whenever we finally lived together again. 1.5 years will be really, really hard on all of you for much longer than just that time. Please don't give in. This is not okay and it's not appropriate at all for her to request this. If I were your husband, I'd have to be telling her, are you really willing to abandon your son because I won't abandon my son? He's an ultimate manipulator, and thoroughly awful. I think your husband might do well having a couple of sessions with a neutral party, just to get some perspective about his mother. Sure, he's standing up for you and your son, as he should, but the guilt can be crippling. Either way, stay or go, he'll be under a huge amount of guilt. You adding your opinions is fantastic, and I know he's listening to you, but it wouldn't take much for him to get a nagging little voice in his head once she starts with the, you know your wife's an independent woman, she'll be fine, or even, you know your wife's a manipulator, she's trying to come between a son and his mother. If he goes to a neutral party, it'll help a lot, I reckon. He can't. She's already ruined the relationship with that ridiculous request. He can either abandon his wife and child for years because his mom is bored, or he can make a stand and let his mother choose whether she's really willing to give up on a relationship with him because he's choosing his wife and child over her. He needs to be firm and say no means no. She needs to get the hint that she can't expect him to abandon his family. Feeling lonely and away from your child must suck. But he's an adult. He tries, but then she gets so angry and frustrated, she starts having bellyaches and fainting. No idea if it's acting or real, but it's effective. He doesn't want to be the reason his mom becomes ill, she's already diabetic. He said his whole life that's what she does when he wants to do something she doesn't agree with. She'll say she'll disown him and never speak to him again. I told him she hasn't done it yet, so maybe she just needs to cool down and come back to reason. He said unfortunately his mom doesn't work that way and is very my way or the highway. His other sister already moved to another country to be with her husband, but because my husband is her only son and his father is deceased, he needs to stay with her. It's his duty, she says. Should I give up on getting into my partner's hobby? I would just like to note that this is definitely a first world problem. 3 years ago, me, F28, and my partner, M30, both went on our first ever ski holiday with a group of, only slightly more experienced, mutual friends. Chose to try skiing and he went with snowboarding. We went for a one-day intensive beginner's course at a snowdome beforehand. We had to travel pretty far as we don't have any slopes near us. I felt fairly confident after this experience. However, he was a complete natural at snowboarding, after years of skateboarding, and fell in love with it. For him this continued once we went on holiday, doing red slopes on his first day. However, I really struggled. I am not well coordinated and spent my time either terrified or on my ass on a green slope. I learned that I do not like the cold and I'm definitely not an adrenaline junkie. A year later another holiday was planned. I decided to try snowboarding after hearing my partner rave about it, and I didn't think I could be any worse than I was at skiing. Ha! Plus I hated lugging all the ski equipment around. I did another day intensive course and my partner was keen to train me. On holiday he was really patient and great, but I began to feel like a burden. I think I cried at some point every day out of frustration and just not getting it. I also experienced my first ever panic attack, resulting in my partner wasting half a day walking me down an icy mountain. He never complained, but I swore to myself I wouldn't put myself through that again. So I got off the hook last year thanks to the virus, but now my friends are starting to plan our 2022 ski holiday. My partner is really keen for me to go and really wants me to enjoy this with him. I like the après-ski partying, but it's an expensive holiday to go just for that. The thought of being on a mountain again just fills me with dread. I think this is going to be a yearly trip that my group of friends go on. If I give up now I am going to miss out on a lot of shared experiences. I'd also like to point out we have other shared hobbies, such as bouldering, board games and warm holidays. Too long didn't read. My partner loves snowboarding. I am terrible at snowboarding and don't enjoy it. Should I keep trying?